The soft light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. Aisha sat on the prayer mat, her head bowed, lips moving silently as she whispered for her husband's health. Her long dupatta draped around her shoulders, her fingers trembling slightly as she made each supplication. Anyone who saw her at that moment would think she was the image of a devoted wife, a woman whose heart beat only for her husband's well-being. In the other room, her husband, Kamal, lay in bed, coughing weakly. He had been feeling ill for the past few days, nothing alarming, just a persistent fatigue that wouldn't leave him. He called out for water, and Aisha rose immediately, her face soft with concern. She held the glass to his lips, watching as he drank slowly, her other hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You'll be fine soon," she said, her voice warm and soothing. "I've prayed for you all night." Kamal smiled faintly, his eyes full of trust. "I know, Aisha. With you by my side, I feel safe." She smiled back, and in that smile was a secret no one could read. The house was quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves outside and the soft ticking of the old wall clock. Aisha moved to the kitchen after making sure Kamal was comfortable. The smell of cardamom and tea leaves filled the air as she prepared his morning tea, the ritual that had become as much a part of their marriage as the prayers she recited for him. She held the steaming cup in her hands for a moment, watching the swirl of heat rise in the air. Her eyes lingered on a small, inconspicuous glass vial tucked behind the sugar jar, the same vial she had started using a few weeks ago. But not today. Not yet. She carried the tea back to the bedroom, her footsteps light, her expression gentle. She placed the cup on the bedside table and sat beside him, brushing back his hair like a doting wife. "Drink this, it will make you feel better," she murmured. Kamal obeyed, sipping the tea slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through his chest. Outside the door, Kamal's mother passed by, pausing briefly to look inside. She smiled at the sight of Aisha attending to her son, whispering a small prayer of gratitude. To everyone in the family, Aisha was perfect, loyal, caring, soft-spoken. She was the daughter-in-law who seemed to have stepped straight out of a mother's dream. Later that afternoon, after Kamal drifted into a light sleep, Aisha sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. Children ran past, laughing, while a bicycle bell rang in the distance. She leaned her head against the window frame, lost in thought. In her mind, two worlds battled, the one where she wore the mask of a loving wife, and the other where dark intentions brewed like poison in still water. Every knock at the door, every phone call from a relative asking about Kamal's health, every word of sympathy from the neighbors, it all strengthened her facade. She played her role flawlessly, the concerned wife, the selfless caretaker. And at night, when she knelt on the prayer mat, she whispered words that everyone would believe were prayers for his recovery. But the prayers were her shield, and the smile her weapon. She thought back to the life they had shared, the quiet resentment that had grown in her heart over the years. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, creeping shadow that had settled in her soul. And now, as Kamal's weak breathing echoed softly in the room, she felt a strange calm. The first move of her plan had been set weeks ago, tiny, undetectable, and careful. Kamal's occasional dizziness, his fading appetite, his unexplained weakness, all the signs were there, but no one suspected her. Not even him. He trusted her completely, and that trust was her greatest weapon. As evening fell, Aisha returned to the prayer mat, performing the same ritual of devotion. Her whispered words filled the room. "Ya Allah, grant my husband health and long life," but inside her heart, another voice whispered, "Soon. Very soon." The next morning began like any other. Sunlight spilled across the room, but Kamal's face was pale, his lips dry. He tried to sit up, but a sudden wave of dizziness forced him back onto the pillow. Aisha immediately leaned over, pressing a hand to his forehead. It was warmer than it should have been. "You need rest," she said softly, her voice the perfect balance of worry and affection. "I'll bring you tea. It will help." Kamal nodded weakly, his eyes half closed. He had been feeling off for days, but this morning, the The weight in his limbs and the heaviness in his chest were impossible to ignore. Down in the kitchen, Aisha prepared the tea slowly, methodically. Steam rose from the cup as she stirred it with a soft clink of the spoon. Her fingers hesitated for a moment near the sugar jar where the tiny vial was hidden. Her eyes lingered, then slid away. Not yet. Patience was her ally. When she returned to the bedroom, Kamal was shivering lightly. She placed the cup in his hands and held them steady as he sipped. The warmth seemed to soothe him, and he sank back into the pillows. By mid-afternoon, his condition had worsened. He struggled to walk to the bathroom, his vision blurring, and a sharp pain tugged at his stomach. Alarmed, Aisha suggested they call a doctor. Dr. Rahim arrived within the hour, his stethoscope cold against Kamal's chest. He asked the usual questions, checked his blood pressure, and examined his eyes. After a thorough check, he offered a small, reassuring smile. "It seems like a stomach infection," he said. "Nothing serious. He just needs rest, light meals, and some medicine. He should be better in a few days." Aisha nodded with relief, though her heart remained perfectly steady. She walked the doctor to the door, thanking him with all the grace of a devoted wife. Back inside, Kamal's mother hovered near the bed. Her old, sharp eyes scanned her son and then flicked toward Aisha. "He's never been this weak," she muttered. "Strange, very strange. Ammi, the doctor said it's nothing serious," Aisha replied, her tone respectful but firm. "I'll take care of him. You just rest." The older woman hesitated, clearly uneasy, but said nothing more. She trusted her daughter-in-law because everyone did. As night settled over the house, the sound of crickets drifted through the open window. Kamal's fever rose and fell in waves, his breathing uneven as he turned in his sleep. Aisha sat beside him with a damp cloth, gently wiping his forehead, humming a soft lullaby under her breath. Anyone passing by the door would see a picture of loyalty and love. But inside Aisha's mind, a different song played, one of cold calculation. The doctor's words echoed in her head. A stomach infection. Nothing serious. It amused her how easily the truth could hide in plain sight. Every symptom was unfolding exactly as she had expected, yet no one suspected the danger living under this very roof. The next morning, Kamal woke up exhausted, his body aching. His mother brought him some porridge, but he couldn't eat more than a few spoons. Aisha sat by his side, patting his hand gently. "You'll get better," she whispered. "I won't leave you for a second." And she didn't. She was always there, making tea, adjusting his pillow, reading verses softly by his side. To the world, she was an angel. In the quiet moments, when he drifted into feverish dreams, she studied his face. Every line of trust, every blink of reliance, fueled her secret resolve. The house felt different now, a place where shadows grew longer with every sunset. On the third day, his fever spiked again. Aisha feigned panic, calling the doctor once more. Dr. Rahim arrived, concerned but not alarmed. He gave stronger medicine this time, shaking his head. "Strange," he said. "He should be improving, but he's weaker instead. Maybe stress, or his immune system is low. Keep a close watch." Aisha nodded dutifully, hiding her satisfaction behind worried eyes. That night, as she carried another cup of tea into the dimly lit room, the air felt heavy. She set the cup down beside him, her fingers brushing his hand briefly. He opened his eyes, tired but trusting. "You're my strength, Aisha," he whispered hoarsely. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She leaned closer, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. "You'll never have to find out," she murmured. The house fell silent again, but inside its walls, the real danger was just beginning to grow. The first rays of sunlight crept across the walls of the bedroom, casting long, pale shadows. Kamal stirred weakly under the blanket, his body exhausted from another restless night. His lips were dry, his eyes half open, but the first thing he saw was Aisha's gentle smile as she sat at the edge of the bed. "Good morning," she whispered softly, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "I've made your tea. It will give you some strength." Kamal nodded faintly, his voice hoarse. You're taking such good care of me." Always, she said, rising gracefully and leaving the room to fetch the tea. In the quiet of the kitchen, the air was thick with the warm scent of cardamom and black tea leaves. Aisha moved slowly, almost ceremoniously, preparing the morning cup. She poured the steaming liquid into a delicate white cup, her favorite one for him. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the sugar jar. Behind it, hidden from casual sight, sat the small vial, almost invisible, its contents colorless and silent. She unscrewed it carefully, her movements smooth and practiced now. Just a drop, no more than a raindrop, slid into the tea. It disappeared instantly, leaving no trace. She stirred slowly, watching the ripples fade, until the tea looked perfectly innocent. Carrying the cup with both hands, she returned to the bedroom, her footsteps soft against the carpet. Kamal struggled to sit up, and she immediately supported him, sliding a pillow behind his back. She placed the cup in his hands, steadying it as he lifted it to his lips. The first sip always brought a faint comfort to his face. Warmth spread through his chest, and for a brief moment, he felt like maybe he was getting better. Aisha watched every swallow, her eyes tender, her voice soothing. "How does it taste?" she asked softly. "Perfect," he murmured, smiling weakly. "No one makes tea like you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, and she leaned in to adjust his blanket. Inside, her heart was steady, her mind cold. Each sip brought her closer to the goal she had set in the dark corners of her thoughts. Over the next few days, the tea ritual became his comfort and her weapon. Every morning, as the sun rose, the house filled with the fragrance of freshly brewed tea. Kamal depended on it, asking for it even before food. He told his mother and the few visiting relatives how his wife's tea was the only thing that soothed his aching body. Neighbors who came to check on him always left impressed. They would whisper about how lucky he was to have such a caring wife, one who never left his side, who prayed for him day and night. "She's an angel," his mother would say with reluctant admiration, though deep inside, a small unease lingered. She watched Aisha closely now, but there was never any proof, only the soft clinking of cups and the smell of tea that seemed too innocent to question. One morning, as Kamal lifted the cup to his lips, a sudden wave of dizziness struck him. He blinked several times, the room tilting slightly before him. Aisha's hand was immediately on his shoulder. "Careful," she said with a worried tone. "Drink slowly." He nodded, taking another sip despite the weakness. His trust was unshakable, his love blind. That evening, after he fell asleep, Aisha stood by the window holding the empty teacup. The street outside was quiet, the distant sound of a bicycle bell echoing faintly. She turned the cup in her hands, staring at the faint brown ring left by the tea. Her face remained unreadable, but her thoughts were cold and precise. The tea had become more than a drink. It was a daily ritual, a performance of love that hid the silent drip of betrayal. Every cup was a step deeper into the web she had woven, a web that even Kamal, lying just a few feet away, could not see. By the end of the week, his condition had worsened. He could barely walk without support, and his voice had grown faint. Yet, each morning, he waited for that cup of tea, believing it was part of his healing. Aisha prepared it every day with the same gentle care, whispering soft words as she stirred the cup. But her whispers were not prayers anymore. They were promises to herself, promises that the end she wanted was coming closer with every sip he took. In the quiet, the ticking of the wall clock echoed through the house. Time was moving, and so was her plan. The living room smelled faintly of disinfectant and tea leaves. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the polished furniture and family photos that lined the wall. Kamal lay in his bed, propped up by soft pillows, his face pale and drawn. His cough was weaker now, but so was he. Every movement seemed to drain the little energy he had left. Aisha moved quietly around the house, her dupatta neatly draped, her face the perfect portrait of calm and devotion. She carried a tray with a bowl of porridge and a steaming cup of tea, her step soft, deliberate. When she entered the bedroom, Kamal's mother and two visiting cousins looked up. "You've been such a blessing to this family," one of the cousins said with a warm smile. "I don't know how you're managing everything alone. Cooking, cleaning, and caring for Kamal day and night. Allah will reward you for this." Aisha lowered her gaze humbly. "He's my husband. It's my duty," she said softly, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Kamal's mother nodded reluctantly. Despite her unease, she couldn't deny the evidence before her eyes. Aisha was always there, feeding him, helping him sit up, staying awake at night to wipe his forehead. Even the neighbors spoke of her as a woman of rare patience and loyalty. In the evenings, when the air cooled and shadows lengthened, relatives often stopped by. They would sit in the living room while Aisha served them tea and light snacks, asking politely about their children, their health, their work. Her smile was soft, her voice gentle, her manners flawless. "She's like a daughter to us," one aunt said as she sipped her tea. "I've never seen a young woman handle responsibility with such grace." Aisha only smiled faintly, glancing toward the bedroom where Kamal rested. "I just want him to get well," she whispered. The praise never seemed to touch her pride. Instead, it became her shield, a wall of trust she built higher with every compliment. The more they admired her, the less they could ever imagine the truth. Behind closed doors, her mask never slipped. Late one night, after all the relatives had gone and Kamal had finally drifted into a restless sleep, Aisha stood at the mirror in their room. The dim light reflected her face, serene, untroubled, almost angelic. She studied her own reflection, tilting her head slightly as if looking for a crack in the disguise. There was none. In the silence of the house, she thought about the life she had built and the life she planned to leave behind. Every soft word, every tear shed in front of others, every prayer she had performed in their sight, it was all part of the performance. She had become the perfect wife in the eyes of the world, and perfection was the best camouflage for betrayal. The next morning, Kamal's uncle arrived unexpectedly with fruits and medicine. He walked into the bedroom, his footsteps heavy, and frowned at the sight of Kamal's frail figure. "This is worrying," he said. "You're not improving at all, Beta. But mashallah, Aisha is taking such good care of you. May Allah bless her." Kamal, weak but trusting, managed a small smile. "I don't know what I'd do without her." Aisha stood beside the bed, her hands folded in front of her, her face calm. Inside, she felt an odd thrill at his words. He will never know, she thought. None of them will know until it's too late. That evening, she prepared tea again, her movements slow and methodical. Her mind wandered as she stirred, remembering the way the relatives had praised her, how their voices had been filled with admiration and gratitude. It gave her confidence. The mask was perfect, and no one would think to look behind it. When she entered the room with the tea, Kamal reached for her hand weakly. "I'm lucky," he whispered. "No man could ask for a better wife." She smiled, lowering herself to feed him a sip from the cup. Her heart didn't stir with love, only with the quiet certainty that the world around her remained blind. The mask of innocence stayed firmly in place, and with every passing day, it became harder for anyone to imagine that the angel they saw could ever be the shadow they feared. Kamal woke before dawn, his body heavy as if pinned to the mattress. A dull ache spread through his stomach, and his mouth was parched. He tried to call out for water, but his voice was hoarse and thin. The room spun slightly when he turned his head, and for the first time, a ripple of fear passed through him. Aisha entered quietly, her dupatta drawn around her shoulders, carrying a glass of water in one hand and a small tray with medicine in the other. Her expression was calm, almost angelic. "You're awake," she said softly, setting the glass to his lips. "Drink slowly." The cool water eased his throat, but the weakness in his arms and legs was unmistakable now. He managed a small, forced smile. I don't know why I feel so drained," he murmured. "It's the illness," Aisha replied gently, brushing his hair back with practiced care. "The doctor said it might take a while. You just need rest." She handed him a pill and guided him back onto the pillow. Inside, her thoughts were sharper than her soft words. "It's working." Slowly, silently, just as planned. Over the next few days, subtle symptoms began to surface. Kamal's hands trembled when he tried to hold a spoon. He often complained of a metallic taste in his mouth, and food no longer appealed to him. His skin grew paler, and faint dark circles shadowed his eyes. At night, he would wake sweating, confused, sometimes calling Aisha's name like a frightened child. She was always there, always smiling, always wiping his forehead with a damp cloth. The household began to notice the changes, but no one suspected Aisha. Neighbors came by to ask about his health, and relatives shook their heads at his frail figure. "It's strange," one uncle said one afternoon, standing at the foot of the bed. "He's young and strong. I can't believe an infection has made him this weak." Aisha pressed her lips together in a perfect imitation of worry. "The doctor said it happens sometimes. I'm giving him all his medicines and prayers." Her performance was flawless. She stayed by his side for hours, reciting verses under her breath, spooning tiny sips of tea into his mouth. When others were around, she let her eyes glisten, as if on the edge of tears. Kamal's mother, however, felt a growing unease. She watched the way her son struggled to keep his eyes open, the way his fingers trembled. One evening, she caught Aisha standing in the kitchen, stirring tea with an odd stillness, her face unreadable. "Add some honey for him," the older woman said suddenly. "It will help his strength." Aisha turned, smiling faintly. "Of course, Sammy." She opened the cupboard and reached for the honey, her movements smooth, unhurried. The small vial behind the sugar jar remained hidden, its presence a silent accomplice. That night, Kamal experienced his first bout of vomiting. He coughed weakly into a basin while Aisha rubbed his back and whispered soothing words. His mother hovered anxiously, suggesting they take him to the hospital. "The doctor said it's a normal infection," Aisha reminded her gently, her tone calm but firm. "He just needs time. Hospitals will only stress him more." Kamal, exhausted, agreed with a weak nod. He trusted Aisha completely. Her calm voice was his anchor in the fog of his suffering. As the days passed, the first signs of true danger became harder to ignore. His steps faltered when he tried to walk, and his breathing occasionally hitched, as if climbing an invisible hill. He began to sleep more, slipping in and out of consciousness for hours at a time. Aisha's mask never wavered. She cradled his head, whispered prayers, and stayed awake long into the night. In the eyes of everyone else, she was the only reason he was surviving. But in the quiet of the kitchen, alone with her thoughts, she felt the chill of control seep through her veins. The subtle symptoms were there, the weakness, the trembling, the paleness, yet no one saw the invisible hand guiding his decline. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Aisha washed the teacup slowly under the running tap. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the water's surface. She smiled to herself, a faint, cold curve of the lips. The first signs had appeared, and still, no one suspected the gentle wife with the soft prayers and the innocent eyes. The house was quieter than it had ever been. The faint hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence, broken only by Kamal's shallow breathing. His mother sat at the edge of his bed, her wrinkled hand gently holding his. She had spent the whole night awake, watching the rise and fall of his chest, her heart heavy with unease. Her son looked nothing like the man he had been a month ago. His face was gaunt, his lips pale, and his once strong hands now trembled even in sleep. She had raised him, nursed him through childhood fevers and adolescent scrapes, and a mother's heart always knew when something was wrong. This was not the normal course of an illness. Her eyes shifted to Aisha, who entered the room quietly, carrying the familiar tray with tea and porridge. Her face was calm, her steps graceful. "Here," Aisha said softly. "I've made his tea. He'll feel better after this." Kamal's mother watched her daughter-in-law closely. She noticed how Aisha's hands never shook, how her expression never faltered. It was the picture of devotion, and yet something about it felt too perfect, too rehearsed. "Aisha," the older woman said slowly, "don't you think he should go to the hospital now? He's weaker every day. Aisha set the tray down and knelt beside the bed, her tone patient. Amy, I understand your worry, but the doctor said rest is best. Hospitals are full of germs and stress. He just needs time and care. Kamal stirred weakly and opened his eyes. Amy, please listen to her, he whispered. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be home with Aisha. His mother forced a smile for his sake, but her heart sank. Even in his weakness, he clung to his wife's words as if they were law. She wanted to insist, to argue, but she knew upsetting him would only make things worse. That afternoon, while Aisha was in the kitchen preparing the next cup of tea, the older woman wandered in quietly. Her eyes scanned the counters, the shelves, the familiar jars of sugar and tea leaves. Everything seemed in its place. But a mother's instincts are sharp, and unease lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. Do you need help? She asked suddenly. Aisha turned with a polite smile. No, Amy. Please rest. You've been awake all night. Her voice was soft, respectful, but it carried the subtle firmness of someone in control. The older woman hesitated, then left the kitchen, her suspicion growing. That night, she confided in her sister over the phone. He's getting worse, she whispered, her voice trembling. And I can't shake this feeling something's not right. He should be better by now. Maybe it's just the infection lingering, her sister suggested. But if you feel it in your heart, take him to the hospital. She looked toward the bedroom, where Aisha's soft voice drifted out, reciting prayers. Kamal's weak laugh followed, as if her presence alone brought him comfort. The older woman's chest tightened. How could she convince anyone that the angel they all praised might be hiding something darker? The next morning, she decided to act. While Aisha went to hang laundry in the courtyard, Kamal's mother sat on the edge of his bed. Beta, she said softly, please let me take you to the hospital. Something is wrong. A mother knows these things. Kamal reached for her hand with trembling fingers. Amy, I trust Aisha. She takes such good care of me. Don't worry so much. Her heart cracked a little at his blind faith. She kissed his forehead and said no more, but inside, her suspicion turned to fear. Later, when Aisha brought in the tea, the older woman watched closely. The way she stirred, the way she lifted the cup with both hands, the gentle smile she wore, everything seemed perfect, yet too controlled. She wanted to speak, to ask the question burning in her mind, but the words stuck in her throat. Without proof, she would sound paranoid. No one would believe her, not Kamal, not the relatives, not even the neighbors who called Aisha an angel. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the older woman sat by the window, staring at the sky painted in streaks of red and gold. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, defeated. In the other room, Aisha's soft laughter mixed with Kamal's weak voice. It was the sound of a perfect marriage to anyone listening, but to a mother's heart, it was the sound of a storm quietly gathering strength. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft creak of the ceiling fan and the distant barking of a stray dog. Kamal lay on the bed, his skin clammy, his breathing shallow. Every few minutes, a weak cough rattled his chest. Aisha sat on the floor beside the bed, her head bowed low against the prayer mat. Oh Allah, please give him shifa, she cried, her voice breaking as she raised her hands to the sky. Tears streamed down her cheeks, glistening in the dim light of the bedside lamp. To anyone who saw her, she was the picture of a heartbroken, devoted wife, begging for her husband's life. Kamal's mother, who had been dozing in a chair in the corner, woke to the sound of her daughter-in-law's sobs. Her heart ached as she watched Aisha pray, her words echoing with raw desperation. For a moment, guilt pricked at her own suspicions. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe her unease was just fear. Nothing more. Aisha's hands trembled as she wiped her tears, but her mind remained razor-sharp. Every loud cry, every whispered plea, every tear that slipped down her face was part of the mask she had crafted so perfectly. When she rose from the prayer mat, her eyes red and swollen, she moved toward the bed. She touched Kamal's forehead, murmuring, "You will be fine. I will never stop praying for you. He opened his eyes slightly, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. You're my strength, Aisha. I hear your prayers, even in my sleep. She forced a sob, leaning over to kiss his hand. Don't say that. You will live a long life. I won't let anything happen to you. But inside, she felt an icy satisfaction. His voice was weaker now, his grip almost non-existent. Every drop of tea, every carefully measured dose from the vial hidden in the kitchen had brought him here, to the fragile edge between life and death. The next morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Aisha was already in the kitchen. She brewed tea slowly, methodically. Steam rose from the cup, and her reflection shimmered in the polished metal of the spoon. Her hand hovered briefly over the sugar jar, where the small vial waited like a silent accomplice. She let a drop slide into the tea, invisible and deadly. Stirring it gently, she whispered to herself, "For his peace and mine." When she entered the bedroom, Kamal's mother was already awake, whispering her own prayers by the window. Aisha's tear-stained face and trembling hands earned her an immediate look of pity. "You prayed all night?" the older woman asked softly. "Yes, Sammy," Aisha replied, her voice breaking. "I begged Allah to save him." The mother sighed, wiping her own tears. "Allah will listen. He sees your heart." Aisha lowered her gaze and handed the cup to Kamal, helping him take the first sip. His eyes closed briefly in comfort, unaware of the betrayal hidden in the warmth of the tea. Throughout the day, Aisha continued her performance. She recited verses, wept in corners where everyone could see her, and whispered to neighbors who came to check on Kamal, "Please make dua, he's not improving." By evening, relatives had gathered in the living room, their faces somber. Aisha sat on the floor, her head bowed, sobbing uncontrollably. They all praised her patience, her faith, her tireless care. "She's a true wife," one uncle said softly. "If anyone's prayers can save him, it's hers." Aisha cried louder, rocking back and forth, her voice trembling as she said, "I just want him to live. I can't live without him." Every tear drew sympathy, every prayer earned trust. And behind that trust, her secret work continued, without suspicion. Late that night, as the house settled into uneasy sleep, Aisha sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across her face. Her tears had dried, leaving only the quiet curve of a satisfied smile. She whispered to herself, "Soon it will all be over." In the other room, Kamal whimpered softly in his sleep, his body growing weaker with each passing hour. And in the darkness, her desperate prayers still lingered in the air, a perfect disguise for the storm she had unleashed. The morning light spilled weakly into the room, muted by gray clouds. Kamal lay unconscious, his breathing shallow and uneven. Aisha sat beside him, dabbing his forehead with a damp cloth, her expression calm, but her mind alert. Each passing hour brought her closer to the ending she had silently planned. But fate has a way of unraveling even the most careful deceptions. Kamal's mother shuffled into the kitchen that morning, her heart heavy with dread. She had slept little, haunted by the sight of her son's fragile body. Aisha was in the bedroom, so the kitchen was empty. The older woman decided to prepare some soup herself, hoping it might give Kamal strength. As she reached for the sugar jar to sweeten the tea she planned to serve with the soup, her fingers brushed against something hard and unfamiliar behind it. Curious, she pulled it forward, a small, clear vial, half filled with a colorless liquid. Her heart stopped. For a moment, she simply stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't need to be a doctor to feel the wrongness of it. Her instinct screamed that this was the shadow she had been sensing all along. She heard footsteps behind her. Aisha's voice floated into the kitchen, calm and sweet as always. "Amy, you're up early." I was just about to make his tea. Her words froze mid-sentence as she saw the vial clutched in the older woman's trembling hand. For the first time, the mask cracked. A flicker of fear, sharp, fleeting, but undeniable, passed across Aisha's face before she forced a smile. "Oh, that? It's just some herbal extract I've been using. For his health." Kamal's mother's eyes narrowed. Herbal extract? Hidden behind the sugar jar? Why have you never mentioned it to the doctor? Aisha hesitated, her mind racing. She had been so careful, so precise, and now this tiny oversight threatened to shatter everything. I didn't think it was important. It's just something my grandmother used to. Enough, the older woman snapped, her voice breaking with emotion. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. You've been giving this to him, haven't you? The sound of her raised voice traveled down the hall. Relatives who had stayed overnight stirred from the living room, curious and concerned. Aisha's carefully built world, layer by layer of sympathy and trust, began to tremble. She lunged forward, trying to grab the vial, but the older woman pulled back, clutching it tightly. I'm taking this to the doctor, she said, her voice firm now, sharpened by maternal rage. If this is what I think it is, you'll... Aisha's breathing quickened. She forced herself to calm down, to summon the tears and trembling voice that had saved her so many times before. Amy, please, you've misunderstood. I would never harm Kamal. I love him. Love doesn't hide in the dark, the older woman said, her voice shaking but resolute. Love doesn't leave a man like this. In the bedroom, Kamal stirred faintly, his weak voice calling for his mother. The commotion had reached his fading awareness. Relatives entered the kitchen, their eyes darting between the vial, the trembling mother, and Aisha's pale face. What's happening? One of them asked. She's been hiding this, the mother said, holding the vial high. And my heart tells me this is why he's dying. The room fell silent, the weight of her accusations sinking in. Aisha opened her mouth to speak, but for once, the words didn't come easily. The sympathy in the room was shifting. Doubt, sharp and cold, began to creep into the relative's eyes. The mask she had worn so perfectly, the tears, the prayers, the gentle hands, now had a visible crack. Aisha retreated a step, her mind a whirlwind of calculations. She could still cry, she could still deny, but the vial in the older woman's hand was a truth more powerful than any performance. In the bedroom, Kamal coughed weakly, his voice faint. What's going on? His mother turned to him, her face wet with tears. Don't speak, Beta. I'll fix this. I swear I will. And for the first time, Aisha felt the walls of the house, once her stage, closing in on her. The whispers that had once praised her devotion now buzzed with suspicion. The hidden truth had finally surfaced, and the life she had controlled so carefully began to unravel with a single, overlooked clue. The house that had been filled with whispers of sympathy now echoed with shock and betrayal. The small vial, now resting on the doctor's desk, glinted under the harsh white light of his clinic. He turned it slowly in his hand, his face grim. This isn't medicine, Dr. Rahim said in a low, deliberate voice. This is poison. Very slow, very subtle. A few drops over time and the body shuts down, just like Kamal's has been. Kamal's mother closed her eyes, a sob escaping her lips. The relatives who had gathered behind her gasped in unison, their trust in Aisha collapsing like a fragile wall of glass. Aisha stood in the corner of the room, her face pale, her fingers twisting the edge of her dupatta. For once, she could not summon tears. The doctor's words had stripped her of the only shield she had ever needed, her mask of innocence. When they returned home, the atmosphere was different. The house that had once been her stage now felt like a prison. Kamal lay in bed, barely conscious, his breathing shallow. His mother sat beside him, her hands trembling as she stroked his hair. Beta, she whispered through her tears, I'm so sorry. I should have taken you away sooner. I should have listened to my heart. Kamal opened his eyes weakly, his gaze shifting to Aisha. For a moment, there was confusion in his face, then a glimmer of realization. His lips parted, but no words came, only a faint sound of pain and betrayal. Aisha took a step forward, her voice shaking. Kamal, I didn't mean, the words died in her throat. What excuse could she give now? That she had prayed for his life with the same lips that fed him poison? The police arrived that evening after the doctor notified the authorities. Two uniformed men entered the home, their boots heavy on the tile floor. One of them read out the preliminary charges: attempted murder, poisoning with intent to kill. The neighbors gathered outside, whispering and craning their necks. These were the same people who had praised her as the perfect wife, the angel of the house. Now they looked at her with disgust and fear. As the officers took her by the arm, Aisha began to cry, real tears this time, born not of guilt but of the cold fear of losing everything. "I prayed for him," she cried, her voice breaking. "I prayed for him every night." Her mother-in-law's voice cut through the air, sharp and trembling. "You prayed with your lips and poisoned with your hands. May Allah judge you." Kamal's body was rushed to the hospital for urgent treatment. The doctors worked tirelessly, flushing his system, trying to undo weeks of silent damage. But the poison had seeped deep, weakening his organs. He lingered between life and death, his breath shallow, his once strong body now frail as a whisper. Days later, in a cold courtroom, Aisha sat in handcuffs. The evidence was laid bare: the vial, the medical reports, and the testimonies of her own relatives. The prayers that had once shielded her were now seen for what they truly were: a performance to mask betrayal. The judge's voice was stern. "This is a crime of the deepest betrayal. A home is meant to be a place of trust, yet you turned it into a place of death." Aisha lowered her head as the verdict was read. Years in prison awaited her, years where no amount of tears or whispered prayers could change her fate. Back in the quiet house, Kamal's mother sat by her son's bedside, her fingers laced with his weak hand. Whether he fully recovered or not, life would never be the same. The laughter that once filled these rooms was gone, replaced by a silence heavy with memory and loss. The final consequence had arrived, not just for Aisha, but for everyone touched by her deceit. Her prayers, once loud and desperate, had become a haunting echo in the home she had destroyed. The woman who had prayed for his recovery and poisoned his tea had lost everything: her freedom, her marriage, her place in the family, and the mask she had worn so well. In the end, the truth burned away every lie, leaving only the ruins of a life built on betrayal.